Hi everyone, my name is James Whiffen and I'm a freelance compositor and motion designer working on independent films, music and corporate videos. In this course we're going to create a responsive user interface that reacts to our live action footage. Some of the topics that we will be discussing in this course include matchmoving in PFTrack, the principles of motion design, simulating water in Maya, and compositing all our elements together in NUKE. By the end of this course, you'll have learned how to composite responsive motion design into live action footage. I'm excited to work with digital tutors and share these valuable tricks and techniques with fellow artists. So let's get started with the first lesson. In this lesson, we're going to matchmove our footage in PFTrack. I've created a new project for this and called Liquid UI, and that's just in J drive project files, and that's where PFTrack will set up its folder structure. Something to note is I'm working at 25 frames a second and I'm starting at frame 1. If we go into the media browser and under J drive, we can see under clips, raw footage that we have Alright, I've cached the clip so we can scrub through in real time, examine our clip, and let's add in the PFTrack node. So we'll plug that in here and let's go preview so we can see where the trackers are. And because I've had the luxury of tracking this shot beforehand, I know that PFTrack thinks that the keyboard is a much better place to track than the desk. However, it's not where the keyboard is that our motion graphics are going to be appearing, it's on the desk. So we need to encourage PFTrack to place more trackers on the desk area. And how do we do that? Well, we could selectively draw masks, but I'm too lazy to draw masks, so I'm going to let the computer do all the work and just tell PFTrack to track a truckload of frames. And because we have so many frames, there will be a decent amount on the desk. And another reason PFTrack will place more on the keyboard is because it doesn't have a hand obstructing it. So the reason I'm just going with so many points is just to make sure that we get as many points as possible on the desk so that we can set our ground plane to that very easily. So 800, it's going to pick 800 places to track, 800 trackers, and it's going to pick the best 400 from those. The window size I'm going to bump up to 50 because, just because I want the most accurate track possible. I have a really fast computer, so it doesn't affect me too much. If you have a slow computer, you don't need it to be exactly 50. You can go smaller. I just prefer to have it as accurate as possible. The search range doesn't need to be any higher than the default because there's not too much movement. The movement that the camera does is pretty much just gentle pans looking here and there. So 36 will be fine for that. This also has a drastic impact on the render time, the processing time, because if it's searching wide areas for the window size, that is very CPU intensive. So we can make this go quicker by actually lowering this to, say, 30 or 20. So 30 by 30 is actually less movement in the Y, so I'm going to drop that to 20. The pick threshold is actually set to 20% for feature threshold, but I'm just going to leave that at default. Minimum track length of 5 is fine, and small actually is better, I find, than large, just because we have so many trackers. There just isn't enough room to fit them all on if we have a scale of large. And I want better accuracy, because that's going to give us the most accurate track I've found. And let's go ahead and auto track this. We can actually hold down Shift to auto track that in the background. Now while that tracks, we can see the progress here. We can go into the media browser, and under source images we have a barrel distortion chart that I have shot, and that's actually in the media bin. So I'll drag this in here, and what we want to do is undistort this. This has been shot with the exact same lens that this footage has been shot with. This is the WD-H43 wide angle lens, and because I'm working at 720, you also need to scale down your lens distortion chart to that exact size, otherwise you will get the wrong result. So I've made sure I've labeled it lens, camera model, distortion grid, resolution. So what we want to do is right click and add in the undistort node. And let's draw a new line here let's go with this line because we can see the whole line. I should have filmed this closer to the bottom because that one's actually cut off, but this will work pretty well for us. And this line is actually so thick that I'm just going to place the point at the very top of the line, just so that I can get it as accurate as possible. So move all of these points to the very top of the line, and once we've done that, we can zoom out and we can solve this line here. Now that looks straight, although one line often isn't enough to solve the whole thing. We can find out by drawing another one, and we can see no, this isn't straight at all. It's straighter than it was, but it's still bent. So let's come in and drag this to maybe the bottom of the line, and maybe add a few more points as we need to. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so line 2, let's solve for line 2 as well. Now they're both straight, and let's also solve for high order distortion as well. So we have a bit of that as well. And I'm just going to solve the first line again, solve the third line, sorry, the second line again. And that way we just get a balance between the two, and that looks very straight. So let's just check that the horizontal, sorry, the vertical is also straight. Let's bring that in, that to the very left-hand side, and see that, yes, that is very straight. Thank you, PFTrack. We don't need that line. Okay, so here we have the undistort node, and when this track has actually finished, when it gets to the end and back, we can just copy this node and actually paste that underneath, because we have the exact same footage details. Well, this footage is exactly the same as this footage here, so we can use this node to undistort our footage. So I'll see you when this is finished. Okay, so that is finished, and here we have all our tracks. Now what we need to do is just go through and delete the points that are bad, and we can see any points that are on the hand we know are wrong, and any points that have these way out tails that don't match with the general movement of the scene. We also need to delete those, and also points that are impossible to track, such as these 3 points, because they only sit on one plane of contrast. So the easiest way to do that would be with the marquee tool, and you can hold down Alt for lasso marquee and just delete twice, once to delete and second to confirm, because you need to confirm the deletion. Whoops, I just deleted the node. So let's delete that, and this can take maybe 5-10 minutes, so I'll just do this in my own time, but I'll see you when all the tracks have been, all the bad trackers have been deleted. Okay, so I've deleted pretty much all the bad ones. There's probably 1 or 2 or 3 that I might have missed, but we can just threshold those out later on. So let's plug the auto track into the undistort, and we'll see that the footage becomes undistorted. We can't see the trackers, and that's because we need a camera solver node to be able to see those. And we can see that they have been pushed out to match this distortion. So we can see we had that auto tracker there, and then it's been, all the trackers have been pushed out to correctly model this distortion. And with the camera solver here, let's just go solve all. We'll just let PFTrack work its magic, and this could take a little while just because we have so many trackers, so we'll just let it do its thing. Okay, the camera solve has finished, and I've just set this point as the origin, so you can just select any point, set origin, and let's have a look. It's looking pretty good. Let's go into the 3D view, and we can see that there's a few trackers there that are just plain wrong. So let's grab the marquee, lasso those, and in the trackers, deactivate them. So actually you can't orbit while having the marquee selected, so turn that off and find any other bad tracking points. See a few that are under the ground. We can see one that's way out there. So again, marquee, and delete the bad ones. Okay, deactivate those. Now let's come to the errors. You can see we have a very low margin of error, and that's just thanks to the gentle nature of the scene, even though it does have some slightly subtle movements and rolling shutter. But thanks to the very large window size that we have set, we have very low error, and we can even trim this further down just to remove some of the worst points. So after we refine that solution, we can see that the 3D view cleans up a bit more, and we can see that we have a very nice clear definition of our scene, the ground plane and the keyboard. So let's go back to the one view and let's add in an orient scene node. And we've got the origin in the right spot, but what we want to do is set the ground plane to this ground plane here, or the desk. So let's select all these points here, and just trying to avoid any ones that could be touching the keyboard, and let's set that to XZ plane, and that should give us a pretty nice orientation, but we might just want to rotate it so that X is going across, Z is going back, and that should be good. So let's take off that, and let's see how our match move is going. Very nice. So let's right click and add in the export node, and we need to export a few different things. We need to export one camera for the After Effects, so call this camera AE, and using the After Effects preset, because we'll need to export the camera for After Effects for when we do the motion graphics, so export that. We need a Maya camera because we're going to import this into Maya. That just changes the scene scale so that it fits the Maya scene scale. We need that as well. What we also need is to export the clip. So we can choose the name, we'll call this footage undistorted. And the format for that, we can just take away pass-through and run an 8-bit TIFF sequence out of there. And you can set where you want that to go. I've already exported that, so I won't actually hit the export button, but that will export the footage that has been undistorted, so this clip here, with the distortion taken out. What we also want to export is a PF barrel, and this is just a very small .pfb file that we can use in our compositing application, which in this course is NUKE. And we can use this .pfb file inside of NUKE to reintroduce the lens distortion. So that's a really handy way of having to avoid coming back into PFTrack and redistorting the footage. We can do that inside of NUKE with the help of this node here. So export all of these things, and in the next lesson we'll begin in After Effects setting up our After Effects project file with the camera that we exported out of PFTrack. In this lesson, we're going to set up our After Effects project file and begin creating the design for our user interface. Alright, so here in After Effects, what we want to do is just double click in the project panel and import our undistorted footage from the clips folder. This is what we exported from PFTrack in the previous lesson. And there we have it. And I'm just going to make a new folder for that and just call it clips. I'll put it in there. And then what we want to do with that is just drag it into a new composition. And I'll bring this down here, maybe make a new folder for that and call it comps. And this here can be our main comp. And we'll put this inside there. And what we want to do with this composition is find our Matchmove camera and also put it in here so that we can work inside this composition. So let's double click and import from the cameras folder the Matchmove After Effects. Okay, so that'll be imported as a composition and bring all its null objects with it. We can put that inside the comps, and the name Matchmove AE is fine. So let's just double click on that. We have all our null objects, but what we're interested in is the camera. We don't actually need these null objects because in PFTrack we set the ground plane to be the desk, and that's all we really need to know because this entire user interface takes place on this desk, which is 000 in world space. And you'll notice that the camera is 1 frame short, and that's just because of the PFTrack export, but we can just extend that. We do have the keyframe, so that's all good. Alright, so once we have the camera in here, what we might want to do is just test that everything's working fine by creating a new solid and making that a 3D layer and hitting F4 if you don't see that, and then zeroing out the position, so 0 tab 0 tab 0. and that sets it right at the origin that we set in PFTrack. And now let's hit R for rotation, and let's rotate it on the X to be plus 90, and then let's spin it around, so maybe minus 90. And just to test the match move, we can add a grid effect, which I've typed in here, and we can just drag that on there, and we can see our grid just to make sure that everything's working fine. And yes, indeed it is. So once we know our match move is good, I can remove this here. And what we want to do is just set up the project. I've already saved it, and make sure you save your project so that you get access to the autosave. And what we want to do is change this from 8 bits per channel to float, and we want to work linearly so we get the best possible looking blurs, because we'll have motion blur in our motion graphics. Alright, so once that's done, let's just talk a little bit about the design. I've just imported the end result, and what's important about an effect like this is to know exactly what you want before you film it. I knew exactly, well, roughly where I wanted to click on the desk, just so that when I'd filmed everything, it sort of looked like a coherent end result, as opposed to if I had just randomly clicked on the desk in different places. That would have made the motion design process much more tedious, because I would have had to work around wherever I happened to be clicking and design the user interface around where I happened to point my finger, as opposed to knowing that I wanted to click, say, here, here, there, up there, and then do the scroll text. So you'll see that occasionally I sort of don't click exactly in the middle of where the icons are, and as you can see there, and that's obviously just because you know, when you're clicking randomly on a desk, it is quite hard to you know, get exactly where you want. But overall, it's sort of, I've roughly clicked in the right spots, and I've sort of had to design this interface a little bit around where I happen to have clicked. For example, if I wanted, say, instead of 2, 4, 6, 7 circles, I wanted 8, well, maybe where I clicked around these, if I had 8 circles, actually wouldn't have lined up. So we are restricted based on wherever I happen to click, but I had the design thought out beforehand, which will make the motion design process a lot easier. So I knew that I wanted to have a circular design, and I also wanted to make it sort of like a computer that we would use today. So as it starts up, we can see we have, you know, this is a Windows computer. We actually have some detail in here saying what type of computer and what user it is. Obviously you can't really see it in the motion blur. There it is, it's James PC, and it's Windows 8 64-bit. And so we just got some icons around here, just some general settings, maybe some hardware settings, microphone settings. And also we have the computer hard drives. So that's W drive, C drive. Anyone on a Windows computer will know that Windows labels their drives letters, based on letters. And also what we have here is the capacity, which is a little difficult to see, but this is W drive, and you know, this one's maybe 60% full, and C drive is maybe 80% full. So we can show a lot of information in here using circles. Again, it's important to keep the circular design. And I also knew that I wanted a very minimalist sort of design, and you can see that most of the icons here reflect that. These are sort of Metro style icons, and to find these I just went on DeviantArt and just searched for, lots of people create Metro icon packs so that they can have all these Metro icons on their computer. So you can just download those, and that way everything will sort of have the same sort of design. And also knew that I wanted 2 of these panels to pop up, because once I select which drive I want to use, which in this case is W drive, this console sort of disappears, and by pressing W drive we're now accessing all the programs on W drive. So you can see that we have W drive, it's again 60% full, and all the icons that I have, all these programs that I have installed on W drive now pop up. And we access the Google tab. I knew I wanted to access the Google tab because Google has so many programs that I could easily fill all 7 slots. We've got Google+, Google Earth, Google Drive, Gmail, YouTube, and also we can see that the W drive turns into Google. So this is the Google console, and then we access Google Drive. We have Word, PowerPoint presentations, and Excel documents. Again, I knew that I wanted to, for the end bit, access a Word document so that I could access this scroll feature. And this is actually just the Google Drive. Sort of I screenshotted that and sort of added some lorem ipsum text here. And that allows us to access a program that scrolls. Because I knew that I wanted to show off this cool scrolling effect here. Because as you all know, it's really fun to scroll on any touchscreen device and have these really cool animations where they sort of ease in and out and then bounce. So I really wanted to show that. And by accessing Google Drive and then going to a Word document, I guess you could have also maybe changed this to maybe the Windows Office suite, and then we could have had Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. But I thought it would be cool to add Google Drive just because it has, especially the Google Word, it has a very minimalistic interface. So now that we've discussed the design, let's begin by just coming back to the main comp and setting this up. So what we want to do is create all our elements in one composition. And the reason for that is it's very hard to tell, but this actually has a subtle bevel. And you would notice it if it wasn't here. It would look a lot more plain, but basically this design here has actually been duplicated quite a few times, and it fades off as it goes down in Z-space. So this will become more obvious later on, but if we plan for it now, it's going to make the whole process a lot easier. So what we'll do in the next lesson is begin marking out where our character points and begin creating our actual design. In this lesson, we're going to mark out the clicks that our finger makes on the ground plane and begin designing our user interface. So as we mentioned in previous lesson, we want all our elements created in the one composition so that we can create a very subtle bevel very easily. So to do that, let's create a new comp by hitting Control-N inside the main comp. Now we don't really know exactly how big we want this, but I know that I want this composition to cover the entire desk so that we can animate our objects over the entire desk. So I'm going to start with maybe 2500 wide and 1000 high. Let's go with that. And let's just see. We won't know exactly how big this needs to be until we put this in here. And we'll just call this our UI. It's the user interface design. And let's make that a 3D layer, zero it out, and then just rotate. So get it roughly, and then get it exact. And also we need to scale this down. This is probably too big. So let's go maybe 30%, and the rotation minus 90, 0, minus 90. Let's just see if this covers the entire desk. Okay, so almost. Let's move it over a little bit. And yes, I think this covers the entire desk. Now what we want to do is just mark out where we want the clicks to take place, or where the clicks do take place. And we just go in here and find exactly where or when the character clicks. So this frame here is when the finger makes impact with the ground plane. So let's come into the user interface here, hit Control-Y. This will create a new white solid. I'm just going to call this click 1 and just make it maybe 20 by 20. And now what we can do is come back to the main comp and actually lock this and then go into the user interface. So now we can see this here, but we can also move the this solid around. So I'm going to move it to where I think the click takes place. So I'm just hitting Shift and the arrow keys to move it, and I think that it takes place about here. And also because we know that it starts in this frame, I'm going to hit Alt, begin bracket. So if we take off transparency, we can go into the UI, hit tilde to go full screen, and now we can see it more clearly. what we can do is just find out that before this frame we don't have the click, then we do have the click, and we know exactly where it is in our composition. This is going to be very handy for us. So let's continue with the second click. We can see that it sort of takes place on this frame. So duplicate this, click 2, begin it here, just rename it to be organized. And again, we need to know exactly, oops, see I accidentally moved the whole composition. So let's undo that, and that's because I'm selecting this inside here, inside the main comp. We want to move it inside the user interface, because if we move this, then the first click would become out of place. So when we have this selected, we can then move that to where we think it takes place, and that would be about there. And let's find the third click. That sort of happens on this frame. So we click 3, just rename these. This happens here and takes place right there. Okay, so just repeat this process for the other clicks, and there's only 1 or 2 more, but you already know how to do that. Okay, so now I know where all my clicks take place. I can get rid of this composition. You can see that's where they happen. And we need to design our interface around this. The first element that I want will be the main Windows console logo. If we have a look in here, just hit tilde. I'm going to design this one first. And let's just close off that panel. And let's create a new folder for this and just call this our UI comps, because we'll have quite a few of these and we don't want to muddy up our comps folder too much. And I might just make another folder and call it old for comps that I know I don't need to access, and that would be the Matchmove. So in the user interface comps, let's create a new one, and this will be our Windows console. And this does not need to be anywhere near this big. I'm going to make it, well, maybe 800 by 800. And in here, it's nice that we have a square, because when we create a new solid and make it comp size, we can easily just click on the ellipse tool, and if your solid is indeed a square, you can double click and it will create a perfect circle. If your white solid was a rectangle, it would then create an ellipse. So what we want to do with this is keep the circle but not have it solid. So what we can do is actually duplicate this mask here, set this one to subtract, but then just back it off a little bit. And I actually like it to be a little bit thicker, so maybe something like this. We won't really know until we see exactly how this is going to pan out. And an interesting way to animate this on is to offset these. So what we can do is animate the expansion. I'll just set the second one to none so that it's off for the moment. But remembering that this composition is 800 by 800, we can go -400 on the expansion, and that will be exactly 0. It will be completely gone. And I'm going to keyframe this. And what's important to note is the timing of this transition, because we want all elements to have the same timing so that they look uniform. So let's just say that we want the initial animation to take 30 frames total, which is just over 1 second. So we can set the mask expansion to 0 here, and then what we can do is actually just delete the second one, duplicate mask 1 again, set this to subtract, and then what we can do is actually move this keyframe in 1. So now we can see that we have this little line animating because the animation of our mask expansion is offset. If this was at exactly the same time, we would only get this very thin line because it would be pretty much inverting itself. So if we offset this by a frame or 2, we get this interesting animation. But you'll notice that it completely disappears, and that's because the mask expansion of mask 2 goes to 0. Well, we might want to make this -10 or -15. Let's go -20. And now if we play this, we can see that it looks interesting because it starts off thin, gets thicker, and then becomes thin again. So that's a really interesting look. And in the next lesson, we'll continue designing and animating our user interface. In this lesson, I'm going to continue working on our user interface animation and design. This is what we had the previous lesson. A way to make this look a lot more interesting would be if we, instead of having linear animation, had some curves to our animation. So we can click on the mask expansion and go to the graph editor. We can see we have this boring linear animation. Well, what we can do is if we select these keyframes, we can go right click, keyframe assistant, which is off the screen, and easy ease. And the hotkey shortcut for that is F9. And we'll see that we have this subtle easing animation applied to our graph here. And if we preview that, we'll see it looks a bit weird. And that's because whilst we've applied it to this layer, we haven't applied it to the second expansion. And that's why it has this sort of odd looking appearance. But I would actually like to make this more extreme. And After Effects doesn't supply many presets, but there's this amazing script called Ease and Whiz, which you can download from aescripts.com. And this has a lot of different presets for keyframes. So I'm going to select both these expansions and add in the exponential effect, which is the most extreme. Sine is the least extreme, and they're all ordered very nicely for you. And if we hit apply to that, let's see how that looks. Well, that looks a lot more interesting. I like that a lot. And if we click on the first mask expansion, it still looks like it's very gentle, but we can actually update that with using the show post expression graph. And we can see that this is much more extreme than the frankly boring version, easy ease, that After Effects gives us. So this looks way cooler, and it allows us a very easy way to copy the exact animation between multiple parameters just by selecting it and then hitting apply. Now that we have our first bit of animation, what we ought to do is decide how much motion blur we want. There's a bit of a trend these days to have as little motion blur as possible. We want a small amount, but you'll notice that if we turn on our motion blur, it can kind of muddy up the sort of look. I don't really like how soft things are getting. So what we can do is hit Control K and actually maybe change the shutter angle to maybe 90 or even less. And a value of 90 as opposed to 180 will halve the amount of motion blur. And I think that's about an appropriate amount. We could go to 45 degrees, although I think this is pretty good for what we're doing. So we've done the first circle. Now what I'd like to do is just to make the design look a bit more fancy would be, we'll just call this the outer ring. Nice to have a second ring, one that was a bit thinner. So let's duplicate the outer ring, call this one the inner ring, hit U, and this gets to -20. Let's just scale this down. Let's go maybe 80%, or we want this to be quite close. And let's hit U, maybe it's -18, maybe -10. Let's go -8. So we can see that we have two rings here. And I might want to offset this a little bit because we don't really see the second ring until the very end. I'd rather see it. We can do that by bringing the first keyframes in. Maybe having them end a little afterwards. Now, if they end a little afterwards, that's actually going to go past the 30 frame mark. So what we can do is actually have the first one end quicker. And what that will do is just allow us to see the second circle the whole time. That looks very good. Okay, so now that that's done, let's import the Windows logo, and I'll just show you where I found most of my logos was just on DeviantArt, typing in Metro icon. There's all these great icon packs that I don't have permission to redistribute, so just go on here and download the ones you like. It takes a little bit of hunting to find all the icons that you want, but there are heaps on here, and most of them actually have a lot in one pack. For instance, this one is 725. So thanks to all the artists on DeviantArt for creating those. I'll just import them into clips, images, and import. I've imported mine as Metro icons. I'm just going to import this folder, and in here I have lots of different icons, and under Windows I have the Windows logo. This is the Windows 8 logo, which is in the Metro theme, which is what I like. Now we need to do a little bit of manipulation to this image because it doesn't really look how we want it. I'm just going to scale it down to 30%, and then let's go to the effects and presets and type in tint to remove the color. Let's type in levels, and actually let's invert it first because we want white on black. Okay, so that's looking alright, but we can see from the histogram that we don't have pitch white, and to get pitch white we just drag the input white to a value until we have the actual data, and you'll see that we have almost pitch white. And we can actually clip to output black and white and actually go a little bit further and get an exact value of 1. Actually, we're not getting an exact value of 1 yet. Let's drag that in. We'd have to drag it all the way here, and now we're getting an exact value of 1. Okay, so that's good. Now what we might want to do is add in a little bit of text. So let's add in the text, and that brings up the character panel. I want the text to be white, and I want Sugoi UI, which is actually the font that Windows uses. Just delete that and create a new one. And let's just type in some text. Say this is a Windows 8. People won't really be able to see this, so I just want some information to make it look technical. And we can hit Control Home to center this, and if we, under the paragraph window, center this out, that will center it correctly for us. And actually what I want to do is create a ellipse tool here. What we could do is actually just copy the mask, one of these masks here, paste it on it, and just make sure there's no animation, and remove this expression, change the expansion to 0, set this to none. And what we can do is under the text, we can, under path options, choose this mask here being our path. Now we have quite a few options in the path, and I would like to reverse the path. Now it's down here. I want to make it smaller, so we can double click on one of these points and hold down Control Shift, and that will scale it in a little bit. And what we want to do is change the margin. So we want this to be the text of the top. There we go, we can see that lines up. So we have the Windows 8 Pro, and what we can do is duplicate this and come back to the margin. Set that back to 0, and maybe let's choose reverse path off, and we'll need to again scale this one down because it's sort of being overlapping, but now we can see that it's not overlapping anymore. Maybe scale in just a little bit, and I want to have this as the computer name. So Windows names the computers like this, James-PC, or whatever your name is, -PC, and it's official. This is my computer, and it's got Windows 8 Pro, and that's looking good. Now we just need to animate these elements on. I think it would be nice for these to sort of animate this in a similar way. We can see that our animation starts in the very center and expands out. So with the Windows logo, just go scale, and we had 30 keyframe animation. Set it here, set it to 0, select the scale property, come over to ease and whiz, set that to expo in out, turn motion blur onto all of these, and all of these we will also scale. So set the scale here and 0, ease and wisdom. Now what we can do is have them come one after the other, so maybe leave 2 frames here so that we can see the initial circle animation and then all the text. So it goes 1, 2, 3, one after the other. They all finish at the same time. Let's change that so that this one finishes first, second, and third. And let's examine our animation. Okay, that's looking good. At the start though, I don't really like how this sort of takes up most of that. I would like this animation to start a bit later so that we just have a break. Maybe a little less than that, maybe 1 frame less. So in the next lesson, what we'll do is create all the little icons that pop up around the main console. In this lesson, I'm going to continue animating our user interface. So we have the Windows logo, and now we need some icons to pop up around here. So let's actually bring the Windows console into our UI, and we know that the first click happens up here, and I want that to happen to the top left of this logo. So let's scale this down. That looks about right, and we can just check it in the main comp to see if this looks good. That looks pretty good. Maybe I might want to scale this down a little bit more and bring it up a bit, just so we can see a bit more of it. That's good. Okay, now let's grab the Windows console and put it into a new comp and call this Windows Console Icons. And the reason we add the icons in here as opposed to in the UI is just so that we don't mess it up. We don't get too many layers in here, because this is where we're going to be assembling all our compositions, and if we chucked everything in here, like all the little icons and all their little rims, it's just going to muddy it up. So we organize ourselves as best as possible, and we're going to thank ourselves later. So we need to make this bigger because the icons won't fit in this small comp. So with the lock aspect ratio, let's go 1400 and see if that's big enough. That would appear to be. And what we want to do is create some spokes. So spoke, Control Y to create a new solid and call it spoke. Make it 10 wide, 600 high. And because we made it 600 high, the anchor point sits at halfway. So we can choose to put that at the very bottom there. And that's looking good. And what we want to do is duplicate this a few times. So we want 7 spokes to create 7 branches for the icons to appear on. Now we need to rotate these, or some of them anyway. So let's set a keyframe for rotation, and let's go to frame 30, and let's start to rotate these. So I set a keyframe for all of them. The first one actually doesn't need to rotate because it starts, well, it starts here, and that's where it needs to be at the end. So this one doesn't need to rotate. I'll just remove the keyframes from there. What we do need to do is rotate the rest, and I'm just going to bring up a calculator. So we have 360 degrees in a circle, and we need 7 spokes to fit inside of it. So 51.42 is the rotation that we need. So 51.42, and I'm going to just select that and copy it, and paste it times 2, paste it times 3, and so on. There we have it. Now the spokes we don't want in front of the console, we want them behind it. And the reason that they're not showing through is because what I've done is in the Windows console, just duplicated the outer ring and actually deleted the second mask and just filled it with black. So if we turn on transparency, we can see that we don't have transparency in the middle, and that's good because it doesn't reveal the spokes that we have. Now we have the rotation, but what I would also like is the scale as well. So let's select all of these here, hold down Shift S, so keyframe the scale, hit K to jump forward to the next keyframe, set a keyframe for the scale, and then set it to, not negative, but 0. And then let's select all of these keyframes here, and Ease and Whiz Expo in and out. Now this comp here doesn't have motion blur turned on, so let's select everything, apply motion blur, and see, yes, we have the shutter angle as the same, so we can turn on motion blur and see our motion blur. So that's looking nice. Now what we need to do is add in the little icons to these. What I think would be really cool is if the icons themselves actually scaled up as well. So we can see that this scales from the very center. What we want to do is copy the Windows console, just duplicate it and call it icon ring. And in here, we're just going to delete the text, and inside the logo here, we are going to replace this with our different logos. So icon ring, this will be icon ring A. And basically what we just want to do is go through and replace the different icons, and we'll need 7 of these to fit around the 7 spokes of this Windows logo. So we can begin with the USB, so that will be under clips, and I've organized these into different groups. Under Metro icons, we have under Windows the USB Alt, so I'll just simply Alt drag to replace. Now this won't need the same effects, although it will need color correction because we need to make this pitch white on pitch black. And the scale for this, instead of 0 to 30, this will need to be larger. So I'm going to make this 0 to maybe 120, maybe 130, and maybe even bigger. It's okay if it's obviously it's being blown up, but this is actually going to be scaled down. So don't worry if you're going past 100. It won't pixelate because we'll be scaling this down. So we have the USB Alt, and I'll just check the animation. That looks good. So what we want to do is in Windows console icons, grab the under comps, UI comps, icon ring A, and bring that in here. Maybe scale that down to 50%, maybe even less. Let's try 30%. And put that at the very top of where our branch is. So this comp may need to be bigger if you want to extend these a little further. So we can make this bigger. Let's make it 1600. And let's bring this up to, if we set this to add, we'll be able to see the spoke underneath it. So I want this to start at the very end of the branch. Actually, what we'll do is we'll bring the anchor point to here, to the very edge, and then bring that to the edge of the spoke. Zoom in to get accurate, and let's, again, I'm just using Y, which is the pan behind tool shortcut, to move the anchor point, and I'll hit scale here, scale it from 30 to 0, and we'll exponential scale that. And then what I'll do is keyframe this to the actual spoke. So the first spoke is the one that doesn't rotate, so keyframe that. And let's just see, motion blur needs to be turned on. And it doesn't look like 1600 was big enough. Maybe this is too far out. We'll soon find out. But let's just see what our animation looks like. Okay, that looks cool. So let's just go through A, B, C, D, E all the way until we have 7 icons and place them around the table. And again, they'll each need to be parented to the corresponding spoke. So the second icon would need to be parented to this spoke, and the third to this, and so on and so forth. And once that's been done, I haven't actually replaced all the icons yet. I'm just placed them around, but you'll see how it looks. It looks pretty good. I think what would look more interesting though is if we, instead of scaling these at the very start, actually had them a bit delayed. I think that looks more interesting. One thing I don't like is the fact that the text is offset by 1 frame each. So I'm going to come into the Windows console and find the 2 bits of text and just make them exactly the same. So we'll put both of them here. So they're offset 2 frames from the logo itself. So they're probably the last things to enlarge. It just looked a bit weird, the fact that they both, well, they were offset by 1 frame from each other. Even a single frame does make a difference. That looks a lot cleaner. And actually, because there's so much going on, I wouldn't mind if they were just in time with the Windows logo, just because it's a bit distracting otherwise. So let's grab the Windows logo here and make that 2 frames forward. It looked fine when this was the only thing we were looking at and there were only 3 elements, but now that we have all of them, It's just a little bit confusing when lots of different elements have different animation endpoints. It's just better to keep them all the same. And we can add motion blur to all these icons here. And in the next lesson, what we'll do is come in and replace these different icons with some different designs. In this lesson, we're going to continue working on our motion design. Here's where we got up to. I've just replaced the icons and changed some of the timing here. What I want to talk about for a minute is just the motion blur inside the main comp here. So currently this has motion blur, but that's in the other comp. So this actually has no motion blur based on the camera at the moment. So what we're going to do is turn on motion blur here, and the shutter angle that we want is actually a bit higher than 180. We want to go 270, and that's just because of the shutter speed that I used to film the camera. If you look online, there's actually a conversion from shutter speed to shutter angle that you can use. And also, the problem with this is that if we zoom in here and we compare between motion blur turned on and motion blur turned off, is that there's a bit of a jump in the position. We can see there's a very slight jump, but that's actually making our match move inaccurate. So the correct settings would be to have the shutter phase set to -half of your shutter angle, so -135. And now if we compare the motion blur to no motion blur, we can see that the user interface itself hasn't been shifted towards the left. It is actually in the center of the frame, and the motion blur is being added from there. So this way we actually get our match move looking accurate. And that's a very important thing to remember, because you can actually sort of ruin your match move by having the incorrect shutter phase. So remember, that's -half of what your shutter speed is, or shutter angle, I should say. So once we've done that, let's come in and maybe add in the status of the drives, so how full they are. So in the project here, I have, where are they? In the comps section, we have all the icons. I've just labeled these A icons, and the icons for the second console will be called the B icons. But we'll come into, I think it's F and G, that are the drives, the disk drives. So let's come into F, and let's create a shape layer. So we can do that just by clicking on the ellipse tool and not having a layer selected, and we can draw out a shape. Now we need to move this into sort of the center, actually make this a bit bigger. And we want this to be, well, to line it up correctly, it's just easier if you make it quite large, and then you can sort of line it up with the other circles. And what we want to do is then turn on the title action safe and bring the anchor point to the very center. So now we can scale this fairly accurately, and we don't want any fill. So if you click on fill, set that to nothing, and then stroke, we might want a value of 30 or something like that. Now scale it down a bit. This needs to be quite thick actually, because we want this to be the status bar. I want to be able to see this clearly. So maybe something like this will work for us. And keeping in time with the other effects, let's just see, zoom out here, just see the timing of the other effects by hitting U. You can see that they finish generally around frame 60. So what we can do with this shape layer here is add, it's off screen, but it's trim paths is what you want. And we can set the end from 100% there. Let's just see when these keyframes start. I'm thinking they start at frame 0. Nope, they start at frame 13. That's just the way the timing is. And let's set this to 0. So we want to use the same in-out expo that the rest of the animation has. So ease and whiz and in-out expo is what we want. So let's have a look at this. Turn on the motion blur. Now that's okay, except it doesn't scale because it's not parented to anything that's scaling. So let's just move these down and see this one here is scaling. So let's parent this to D. Okay, now this this status bar goes all the way to 100, so this would actually be the background. So let's set this to maybe 20% opacity. So this is the total size of the disk, and then we have the actual used capacity, and we'll set this to 100%, and I want to make this disk 66% full, and there we have it. So there we have our disk percentage. Now we can copy these into the other layers, so I'll just duplicate these two here, take away the parent, copy them, actually cut them, and go into icon ring G, go to paste them here, and this is the very last frame, so this is where we want to parent them from, and we'll parent it to, let's just see which layers have scale, C, we'll parent them to the disk. Okay, so hit N. And we don't want C drive to be exactly the same capacity as D drive, so let's just make this, or one of these, just hit U, and this disk can be maybe 35% full. Actually, let's go 45. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go into the main comp and see where we are. That looks good. Now what we want to do is come into the user interface, and when the button is pushed, let's just make sure that these are still timed correctly, because I actually offset it because not much was happening at the very start. So yes, indeed, this is the very first frame that C is tapped. So when C gets pressed, we want to have some sort of animation for that. So I think what we'll do is have maybe just like an invert. And a way we can do that is come to the frame where it's tapped, which I believe is frame 64 in my case, create an adjustment layer here, and I'll just call this touch button press, and add in an invert. Blend that with the original 0, maybe come forward 10 frames and set it to 0. And let's just try expo in out. That's probably a little severe considering, actually we just want expo out because the button press ought to happen rather quickly. So if we just have a look at this in the graph view, we can see that's, let's make this bigger, that's the opacity of the invert. So it happens very quickly. It goes from 0 to 100 and then very quickly dies off. In the first frame it dies off half, and that's why it's neutral gray, and then it slowly restores to its original color. Let's just check that in the main comp. What we might want to do is make these guide layers, because we don't want to see those. It actually might be off screen, but it's guide layer there. And let's see how this looks. Okay, that looks pretty good. I wouldn't mind having something else extending past there, so I'm just going to come into UI. Actually, we'll come into the Windows console, and I'll make a new layer. Just make it 50 by 50. That's a square. Make it a circle. Put it to where C is. Put it in the very middle of C. Oops. And at frame 64, when it's pressed, let's start it here. Place it underneath C. And scale it. So you can start out about this size. Getting a bit pixely, let's just turn on freeze transformations. And let's set a keyframe here. And 10 frames, it can be 1600. And let's set a fast blur. It can, whoops, did not mean to drag that. Let's put the fast blur on this white solid. Start it at value of maybe 20 because the scale is quite high. And then hit U, actually keyframe the blurriness. Then hit U and set it to maybe 500. And let's turn the opacity from 100 to 0. and let's expo in out these. So expo out. So there we have a nice button press. Let's check it in the main comp. Oops, so that was definitely the wrong timing. It ought to happen here. And what we want to do is actually cut it out of here because it's clipping. We want to paste it inside here. Now we just need to reposition it because it's in the wrong spot. Put it underneath the icons and center it, and then maybe just hit S. And let's go from maybe 200% to definitely not 1600 in this comp. Let's go 200 to 800. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that was way too big. Let's go 200 to 400. And the blur 500 to 300. There we go. And this is hit U and maybe change that from out expo to out quint, because there's just not enough keyframes there for the expo to look appropriate. That looks much nicer. Okay, so that's just subtle because we're going to have our nice ripples later on. So that's just a subtle way that we can add that effect or add the button press inside the motion graphics. And in the next lesson, what we'll do is transition this first console off so that it can disappear in a very interesting way. In this lesson, we're going to animate the transition of the first console off. So we're going to make this disappear in a very nice way. And what I'm thinking is to make this look as responsive as possible, as soon as this button is pressed, we need the console to spring into action. And we can do that by using the out expo, which means it's going to instantly do most of its movement and then exponentially get slower or fade out. And let's start by going into the Windows console icons and grabbing these spokes here. So let's hit rotation on these. We can see that we have the keyframes already. So what we want to do is actually cut these off, right? And what we want to do is duplicate them, extend them over here, come forward one frame, zoom in, and cut them here. So we have new spokes for this ending transition. And the reason I like to do that is because with the rotation, we want to apply a different kind of ease and whiz, and the easiest way to do that is just to make a copy, because you can't have two types of ease and whiz, at least to my knowledge, on the same layer. So once we have the new spokes here, we can hit rotation, and let's set the rotation. Let's just make sure this is the exact frame. So this is actually the first frame where it needs to happen. So let's move these forward one frame and the old spokes back one frame. And let's start the rotation right now. And in 10 frames, let's make this animation very quick, have all of these come back to 0. So now they're all back in the forward position. We want this to be set to out expo so that it happens very quickly. So you can see in the very first frame, look at how they just spring into action. Now 10 frame transition might be too quick, so let's just make this a 20 frame transition. Let's see how we go with that. Let me just change the work area. Maybe out expo was actually too it's too extreme, so let's make it out quint. Let's try that. That's much nicer. Okay, we also want to work with the scale here, so let's go with scale. Let's take away all the, actually let's just solo the scales on these. Let's alt click on these, because what we want to do is just remove all the old keyframes, because we are going to be using different keyframes. I'm going to delete those and set a new one here, come forward 20 frames, and maybe set this to a value where you can't see it anymore. So underneath the console. And let's go out quint with that. Now what we want to do is have these icons scale down, and remembering that our transition to fade away is only 20 frames long and we're using the out quint setting, let's go into ring A and create the template for the scaling out. So remember that these already have their own ease and whiz settings, and they're set to in-out expo, which is definitely not what we want. So what I'm going to do is just create a null object that's in the very center here. Set the scale, set it to 20 frames forward from 100 to 0 using the quint out feature. And what we're going to do is change the inner ring and outer ring to, actually let's grab the USB, sorry, the icon, parent that here. And let's actually hit Alt begin bracket on that to show in the timeline where that starts. And 1 frame forward, let's actually bring the inner ring and parent that here. And let's duplicate this 1 frame forward, and let's parent the outer ring to this. And also the fill should also be parented to the same null object that the outer ring is parented to. So there we have it. So this is parented to layer 2, layer 3, and layer 1. Let's preview how this looks. Okay, that's interesting, but I think what we could do is actually make this a little bit quicker. We want the whole thing to wrap up within the 20 frames. So let's bring this in so they all finish within the 20 frames. And let's actually have a 2 frame gap in between. So 1, 2 frames, 1, 2. And we could actually make these expo, just because it doesn't look as fast with this because they're not rotating 360 degrees, they're just scaling down. So the expo looks completely fine for that. And let's just preview that animation. It actually does look a little too fast. Let's go back to out quint. Now the reason we're getting so little motion blur with these is because these are actually scaled quite a fair way down. They're parented to the spoke, so that's not the true representation of these, but these are actually fairly large compositions. So what we want to do is actually change the shutter angle in these to something higher so that they actually reflect the proper amount of motion blur when scaled down. That looks a lot smoother. Okay, so let's repeat that process with all of the other items here. We just need to create the nulls. We can actually copy them from here, copy these nulls, and parent the other layers to them, and then change the shutter angle to 270. We don't need to worry about the shutter phase because this is actually inside the other composition, so that won't matter. So here's how the end transition currently looks. I think it's a little quick, so I'm going to slow it down, but I'll do that in my own time. Just one other thing I wanted to show you before we wrap this lesson up is this radial transition that I've put on all the little icons there, and I actually want to put it on the main logo, but in the opposite direction. So we come into the user interface and inside the Windows console, and here we have the Windows console. So what I'm going to do with this is add in the radial wipe, which is like a preset type thing. It's like a transition, sorry. And what we can do here is set the transition completion from 0%. Let's go forward 20 frames. Currently my animation to disappear is 20 frames, although, as I mentioned, I would like to make that longer. And I'm going to set that to 100%. And let's apply expo out to that. Now we don't get motion blur with that, so we have to add CC force motion blur to that. And I'm going to change the shutter angle to 270, so we get lots of motion blur. Now the only problem is that in doing this, we leave the we can see the spokes underneath it. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this, and at the very start of the transition, I'm going to Alt bing in bracket to begin it here, remove these effects, and apply a black fill to this. So we'll still have something back there that's not allowing us to see the spokes. And what I want to do with this Windows console is just increase the motion blur samples, because if you just set it to 8, you can easily see the samples, and there's nothing uglier than motion blur samples. So let's try that. Let's see how we go. I think that looks pretty good. So what we need to do is now create the other console over here, and that's pretty much just the exact same as the first one. If I scrub through here, we can see that apart from the icons, it is identical and the timing is identical. So I go ahead and create that, and in the next lesson what we'll do is, as soon as the button is pressed, we'll animate the sort of clock-like transition of the icons. In this lesson, we're going to continue with our motion design and create these little clock-like transitions where the character presses the console and the application set changes to the Google set. So what we want to do is just take a look at where we're at the moment, and I'm just going to show you a pre-render that I have. We have the button press, and when he presses that button, we have our first clock transition. So I'll just walk through how we did that, and then when the character presses on the Google Docs, all these icons will have to change to Google icons. So currently we've just got like Microsoft Word and Skype and 3ds Max, but when he clicks on the Google menu, we want all of these to change to Google applications. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to the auxiliary console here, and I want to go down to a layer that I have called Matte, and let's just double click on Matte. And what this is basically white everywhere that the console is. And what this allows us to do is have a black solid underneath it. If we hit F4, we can see that it's alpha inverting that. And if we just solo it and turn on transparency, we can see that basically this is a silhouette for anything that's underneath. So when these icons sort of transition off screen, as we can see they sort of transition below the console, we don't get to see them anymore. But without this matte, we would see them. So that looks a bit messy, but with this matte here, we don't have to continue seeing them. And that looks really good. You'll also notice that I was very lazy and I didn't even bother transitioning between this loading icon and C drive. And the reason for that is because the hand was actually covering it. So I was able to save myself a small amount of time there. I'm very lazy, but I think that when you can save time, you may as well do so. So let's now work on when the character clicks on the Google button. So if we come to the main comp, sorry, the UI comp, what we'll see is all these clicks here, and we can go to click 2 and hit I, and this is exactly when this click happens, and this is where he presses. So then once we're at this point in this timeline, let's go to the auxiliary console and go up to this top layer here that I have called rotator, and this is a null that controls all these icons here. They're all parented. So what I'm going to do is just create another keyframe and then go forward 20 frames, so shift page down twice, and basically this rotates 28 degrees, so I'm going to times that by 2. So that should be enough to animate those icons off. So if we come to the start here and then just preview it, we can see that those items or those icons animate off. Now what we want to do is pretty much just copy these icons here, and these will be parented to the rotator as well. We don't want them parented to the rotator. So now we'll see after those 20 frames, these ones still remain. And what we want to do is basically come to a point in time where this rotation has finished and then parent these back to that rotator. So now what we can do is come to the very start of those 20 frames, so go back 20 frames and actually cut these off. And I'll just change the color to something a bit different, so maybe yellow. So if we have a look here, we can see that once the previous icons animate off, these new ones appear, which is nice. However, these icons are exactly the same as the previous ones. If we preview here, we can see Skype changes to Skype, Internet Explorer changes to Internet Explorer. And we don't want that. We need to go to some Google icons. So under Metro icons, we have Google. And let's just go through and replace the icons. It won't really matter which icons are where, except for this one here. Skype actually needs to be Google Drive, because I want the character to access an item from Google Drive. So Skype, let's just click on Skype and Alt-click on Google Drive, drag that onto Skype, and we'll see a change. Now this Google Drive has some effects to make it sort of look transparent because it's set to screen. If we turn those effects off, we'll see the original logo there. So what we want to do is not crush these values any more than we need to. And just by looking at the histogram, I can see that I can actually get away with just bringing the input black to there. And that makes it slightly higher quality. Obviously, looking at it at quarter res, you don't really notice it, but at full res, we get better edges. So let's go back to quarter res, and let's just go through and replace all of these icons. All right, here we have our icons transition. Now what we need to do is make the C drive logo sort of go off the screen as well, and that's in the loading console auxiliary. And we have this C drive here. So what we want to do is find the exact point in time where this transition happens. So we'll just go J, and that's where the start of this rotation. And this is out expo, and it lasts 20 frames. So now we know exactly how this needs to transition out. We can do a position, hit P for position and keyframe that. 20 frames are long in the timeline, and then we want that to basically exit the screen. Now something that's not terribly attractive is seeing this underneath here. So what we can do is I just have this fill here, and we can change the mask expansion to sort of eliminate that there, because we don't really want to see it. You can also maybe even make it a little bit smaller so that we have a sort of a buffer where it can and can't be seen. Although this is currently being keyframed, so we'll just take off that keyframe there. Okay, that looks good. We just need to set this to out expo. So bring up ease and whiz and set that to out expo. So that should now work well with our other transition. If we go back to the auxiliary console, you can see if we do a RAM preview that because they both have the same easing type, they sort of look like they're part of the same transition. Now we need to bring in our second logo, which is the Google logo, and let's bring that in here. And I'm going to scale this up to sort of feel a little bit bigger, probably that size, and we'll just tint it so that it's not green. But I do want a little bit of this gray here, so I'm going to eliminate a small amount of it by adding a levels adjustment, bring in input black, but I'll keep a tiny little bit of that. So there we go, and if we parent this to the icon ring or the C drive logo, after the transition happens, we'll see that they sort of bring each other in. And I'm just going to add an ellipse mask. If you just double click there, we can get a nice mask on the Google logo. That looks good. And we could see the spokes underneath in the auxiliary console. So we need to add sort of a backdrop to this just to make sure that we can never see that. So I'm just going to add a black solid and then set that to the bottom. And hopefully that should take away those spokes. And I'm just going to darken the Google logo a little bit. It's a bit bright, considering everything else is black and white. We want to be consistent. It should be completely black, but I'm going to keep a tiny little bit, something like that. And here we have that. That's looking great. So now let's animate the button press of the Google Drive. If we come to the UI, we can see that character presses the button here, and when that occurs, we have some additional icons that pop up, 3 Google Drive icons, and the character clicks on the top one up here. So we need to make allowances for that. So this is where the icon has to appear, because that's where the character clicks. It's sort of an inconvenient location, really, but we just have to make it work. So what we're going to do is come into the auxiliary console, Let me scroll down and grab a spoke and what else do we want? Maybe just a blank ring. Let's just copy these and bring them into the UI. And the reason we're creating these in the UI is just because the auxiliary console sort of doesn't extend to where this button press occurs. We could always expand it, but this will be just as easy. So let's paste them in here and maybe make them both start at this point, or maybe a bit sooner. This is when the character clicks on Google Drive, so this is when they need to appear. And let's just scale this right down, take off the ease and whiz for now. Maybe 20%. We want it to be about the same size as these other icons here. So that's good, 15%. And let's find where the character actually presses. It's up here. So somewhere around here is where we want to have the icon, and it's also a bit laggy because we have motion blur on. We can also turn off the Windows consoles just to make things a little bit quicker for ourselves. So when the character clicks, I want 3 of these to pop up, one for Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. I want one sort of coming out straight, one on an angle, and then this one also on an angle. So with the spoke here, wherever it is, let's just see when these keyframes end, and let's move it to where we want it. I want it coming from the center of this Google Drive icon, and the first one I want to be 90 degrees, so it comes out this way. Obviously nowhere near as far, so let's just grab the scale, maybe 50%. Maybe 40. And then let's duplicate this one, bring it down here and make sure it lines up real nice. And then Y to change the anchor point to this point here. And then if we parent this to the spoke, we'll get some cool animation happening. Obviously, this is too slow. We want it to happen a lot quicker. Also, we want this to be out expo as opposed to in out expo, because out expo makes it feel like our interface is more responsive. And now let's duplicate this, bring these up, and rotate the spoke. And then duplicate these ones again and rotate the spoke. So this one sort of has to be in a certain location, and the other one I just want to be directly in the middle of the two. So something like this seems to be in the middle. And let's preview. Very nice. Now let's add in the logos to this. So GDocs, we have Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. With Word, I want to be at the top because that's the one the character clicks on. So that it would be the very top one here. Let's scale this right down. And we want to tint this and remove the gray area. And I'll just clip output black, and let's set this to screen. So this appears to be in the middle of the circle, and then let's parent that to the spoke. And let's go U for the spokes animation, and we want to scale the Word logo as well. So scale at 0. Out expo as well. That's good. And what we also want to do, actually let's parent the Word to the blank ring, and then let's scale the blank ring as well. and this will just add a slight interest to the animation with all three being parented. So it's harder to tell at quarter res and without motion blur, but that is going to make it look more interesting. And now all we need to do is repeat the process for PowerPoint and Excel, and also just mat out the spokes here. So go ahead and do that, and once that's been done, in the next lesson what we'll do is transition off this entire console. In this lesson, we're going to transition off the entire console after the Word button is pressed. So we're currently up to this stage where the Google Drive icon has been pressed and we have three icons popping up. And so when the fourth click occurs here, we want the entire console to transition off in a very exciting way, in a very responsive way. So at this point in time, what we want to do is set the anchor point of this Google Drive auxiliary console to the very center of this Word icon here. And the reason we're setting this anchor point is because we're going to scale it. What we want to happen is when W is pressed, everything sort of expands. So if we hit scale, we can sort of see what we want to happen. We want it to sort of scale up. We sort of want it to explode, pretty much. Explode from the direction of the icon. So let's hit scale here, and then let's go 20 keyframes in time forward and set this to, let's try 200. So this console is sort of zooming out, but these ones are not. So what we want to do is parent those to this console. And we can do that by coming down here. We already have some parents, so let's grab spoke and spoke and spoke. Actually, the W does not follow, so we won't parent that, but we'll parent these two here to the auxiliary console. We can see those are zooming out. Currently we don't have enough samples for motion blur, but we can increase those when we want to render. We have the console expanding, but we need to still transition off the Word icon here. What we should do is with this blank ring, I'm going to actually duplicate it and start a new one just so that we have clean transformations on it. So let's go here and maybe remove these keyframes, remove this parent, and reset the transformation. It's off screen, but just go up to Transform Reset. And I believe the scale needs to be 15 to be the exact same size. And let's just find out exactly where that ought to be. Okay, pretty much spot on. And what I want to do here is expand this. So again, 20 frames, and let's see how big we need to make it until it's off screen. So if we go to, actually, it doesn't have to go all the way off screen. Let's just make it this big, and then let's go out Expo here. And with the W logo, what we can do is maybe scale that down. That parent is clean, so we can add a scale in here. I might just add the transformation effect because our scale is already being keyframed. So we type in transform. We can scale this down here. Set that 1 to 0. And let's make the spoke expand with the ring. So if we grab the spoke here and parent it to the blank ring, we can see that it's going to expand with it. Although unfortunately that's going to take the word with us. So let's duplicate this, cut it out, and start fresh here. This one not being parented to the spoke. And the spoke will now go with the blank ring and expand. Now the word itself, let's check what, it currently doesn't have any ease and whiz applied to it, so that needs to be expo out. And we have this little thing in the way, so I'm just going to end it here. It's just the backing for the Google Drive logo, and this is looking good. Now when this ring expands, that's not going to look terribly great in the main comp view. So what we want to do is sort of ease those out. So let's go back to the UI, and I think it's this ring here, blank ring. What we want to do is maybe make a copy. So if we just reveal the source, we'll call this blank ring erode. And what we want to do here is Alt-click and replace, Alt-drag, sorry. So now we have this special pre-comp, and we can basically just erode this starting here, and for the last 20 frames we'll erode. So currently we do have expressions on here. We want to remove those, and what we want to do is with mask 2, we want to subtract it fully. So we keyframe the expansion, come forward 20 frames, and set that to a value of 0. And same with the innering to U. Get rid of these and set a keyframe here. Have that go down to 0. And we want to out expo these, making sure curvaceous is on. And at the very last frame, we can just end them because they will be non-existent. So we can see that it eventually fades out or erodes to nothing, which is very handy for us because we really don't want to be seeing anything. Now we can still see it, so what we might want to do is have that happen either a bit quicker or maybe even keyframe the opacity for the last few frames. So because it's expo out, it's going to happen very quickly to start with. And for the last bits, we'll just keyframe that out to 0. Let's take a render and see how everything's looking. It's always good to have a review of where we currently are. And what I think is that it looks a little inconsistent having this sort of button press twice, but not 3 times. So I'm going to add this sort of button press to when the Google Drive logo is pressed. And also, I'm not really happy with this. I think it needs to erode a lot quicker. It just looks weird. It sort of dwells too long and looks ugly. So let's quickly fix that. So if we go back to the comps and find the erode, we can make this erode happen quite a bit quicker. Not sure how long it currently takes. I'm going to make it 10 frames to erode. And then cut it off. And this will also have its opacity keyframe, so we'll move that to 0. And let's quickly see where we are. We have a button press. I would like to be more consistent by having this button press every time. So I'll bring this over to the Google Drive logo, and that occurs at click 3. So we start this here and move it into position. Alright, that looks better. I have this Google Docs screenshot here, and let's bring this just below the auxiliary console. What we want to do is tint this and then invert it. And let's see how this is positioned when we go back to main comp. So it's a little large, and we also want it to be a bit further up here because this is the title bar. It needs to be at the top. So let's scale this down to maybe 80% and then try there. Okay, it needs to come up a bit further. And maybe across a bit. Okay, I think this is pretty good. So once we have the position all locked down, we can now set the anchor point to where the W is. So let's go to this button press and set our anchor point to the very middle of this W here. And I'm going to start this scale quite large. Let's start it, or let's go forward 20 frames, and it ends up at 80, but we want it to start at maybe 200. Just needs to be off screen, so let's try 350 and expo out. So let's go quarter res, check here. Needs to be a little bit bigger actually. Let's try 400. Let's go 450 for safety. And let's preview this. Alright, that's looking good. And let's pick this up in the next lesson where we'll add in the text. In this lesson, we're going to animate our text. And we can grab some dummy text. There's a generator here. You can generate as many paragraphs as you want. And I'll just copy this. Now let's grab the text tool and sort of draw out where we want our text to go. So I kind of want it to be about this. So we have a little bit of margin left and right. And then let's paste in our text. Okay, it's a little bit small right now. Let's try size 20. Size of 30 seems quite appropriate. And what we want to do here is have this text come up from the Z space. And we can sort of create that illusion by having it come from the bottom and then pushing it back in Z in this comp. So, and come down to text, animate position. And we want to enable per character 3D. And this allows us to move it in Z. Let's push this back, say 800 on Z and maybe 500 in the Y. And what we can do now is keyframe the range selector. So currently start is 0 and end is 100. What I'm going to do is go into advanced and change this to ramp up. Ease the low 100%. And so that will create a very smooth looking result similar to ease and whiz, except now because we have a range selector we can animate this in a more pleasing way, which is sort of by characters, which it's based off of. So because we're using the ramp up, we actually, instead of using start and end, we use offset, and you start at -100 and then go all the way up to 100. So if we have a preview of this, we will see the characters flying up one at a time. Or maybe not one at a time because we have so many characters. Now we're getting so many lines of text coming up at the same time just because of how many characters we have. So I'm going to just try and remove any characters that we don't need. So if we come to when we're at the very end and maybe view this in the main comp, we'll see that we probably don't need all of these letters. So we really only needed the first 2 and a bit paragraphs. So I'm going to go to here and remove the 3rd paragraph. Okay, so here's how that looks. I think what we need to do is maybe add in a page behind the text because it looks a little bare. I also want to scale it down a little bit. So let's begin by adding in the page. And what we want is just a shape layer. So if you create or click on the create rectangle and then don't have any layer selected, you can create a shape. And let's just go to, I've just split the text up into 2 separate ones just because I think it's a bit laggy having that. Oh, it's very laggy anyway, but hopefully it's a little bit quicker this way. But what we want is to draw out a rectangle that's the width of the digital tutors, the Google Docs interface, so something about this big. And we want the fill to be white and the stroke to also be white. And maybe let's turn the opacity down to 20%, maybe 2%. When working linearly, even very small amounts of opacity show up quite a bit more than when working in sRGB. And what we also want to do is just duplicate this and have this one with no fill. So if you click on the fill here, we can set it to non-existent, and then this way we can have this as the stroke only. So boost the opacity to maybe 50. And there we have it. Let's just check it in the main comp. That looks good. I might just move both of those down a little bit, so we have a bit of a break between the interface and the text. Now, because the text is so laggy, we're going to animate it by creating a solid and animating that solid, and then we'll just parent the text to that solid. So here we have a solid 500 wide, 2000 high. Let's just create that and then solo that, and this will be our animation. And I'm just going to add a grid effect to this just so that it's a bit easier to see exactly what's happening. There's grid, and make it quite large. And what we want to do is, when we have the fifth click, we want to position this, and I'm not sure exactly how long, but maybe until the end of the clip it shall swing down. And let's go to ease and whiz, and let's use under under this menu, it's actually cut off on the screen. I'll try and bring it up. We have elastic, which is a cool effect, and that's elastic in and out. And I'll just move this a bit further along. So let's preview what we have here. Now that's very shaky. What we can do is separate X and Y by going to the graph view and then separating these parameters, and just removing any keyframes from X because we only want this to happen on Y. Okay, it's a little difficult to see on a grid. Let's just add in some fractal noise just so that we can see a pattern as opposed to this grid. And I'll just turn up the contrast to see that a bit better. And let's preview our animation. Okay, this is still looking very odd, so let's select the keyframe and choose just the elastic on the out. And that's what we want. So it might be a little bit too much bounce. Let's just bring these keyframes in a bit. Let's see how all that looks in the main comp. So it starts way too quick. And let's, even though that's exactly when the character presses onto the interface, because it's a dragging movement, I don't think the movement should start until a little bit later. Okay, that was too late. Quite a bit too late. Let's go about half and half. It's a little difficult to see because this is too bright. We can't really see what the hand is doing. I think it's a little bit slow. Maybe 2 keyframes behind where it needs to be. Oh, that looks like it was a bit fast, so let's go 1. Every keyframe counts when you're doing animation like this. And let's turn on motion blur to see if that looks correct. That does look good. Okay, so now what we need to do is grab some additional text because our text does not consist of enough. So if we turn this off and then turn on our text layer, turn this back on, and what we'll need to do is add some additional text in and then parent this to our animation. So let's parent this to the white solid, which is turned off, which is what we want. And let's create a matte for this because what we want is when this text is scrolling, we don't want to see it at certain times. So if we could actually use the matte of the page. And one of these shape layers is the page, so we'll turn both of these on. I think the bottom one is the page, and just duplicate that. And it's very laggy just because of the text. But if we turn this opacity up to 100, then alpha matte the text to that, we'll now have a good matte for it. And then let's duplicate these two, and then let's bring this text up. And this is basically what we want. We just want this large block of text at the very top. So with that done, now we can preview this and see what it looks like. And here we have it. So this is looking very nice. We're pretty much finished the motion design. What we just need to do in the next lesson is prepare this for export to NUKE. In this lesson, we're going to export our motion design to NUKE and dive into Maya and generate some simulations for the button presses. And here we have the motion design, and I'm pretty happy with it. I've gone ahead in the UI and cranked the samples right up to 64. That's a little bit overkill, but it's really needed when the text starts to scroll. We really need a lot of samples because otherwise you'll be able to see the sampling if your samples were too low. So all good here. Now to export, let's just turn off the footage so that we don't export that. And we're just going to, well, I'm just going to export this as a JPEG sequence. We don't really have any high dynamic range values that we need to preserve, so JPEG will be fine, and we'll keep the disk usage right down to speed up our workflow. And so I'm just going to choose a JPEG sequence preset from here that I have. I'm going to crank the quality up to 10, and we don't even need an alpha channel because we are just using the limits as the alpha channel. So let's save that. I've already got lots and lots of pre-renders, but basically just make a folder and save it in here. I'll just call this UI. Well, I've already exported it, so I'll call it UI version 2, and then just name it UI version 2 dot frame numbers and then .jpeg. And render that out, and that is all good for NUKE. What we want to now do is jump into Maya and begin our simulations. Alrighty, in Maya, let's set our project file, set project, and I'm working in J drive at the moment, so mine's all set, but just set your project to wherever you're working, and let's go ahead and open up the camera. So I'm just going to go to the cameras directory and open up the Maya version. And once we've done that, let's actually save this as its own scene so that we're not overwriting that camera file. So let's go scenes, and I'm just going to call this pond version 1. And let's look through our camera and set our image plane. So here's the image plane, and let's just tell it where our clips are. Clips, undistorted footage. And we want the first one, and we want to use an image sequence and just check that that's sticking. Yes, it is. Alrighty, so the scene's pretty small. We can tell that each unit is quite large. So our scene is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units across. So let's come up to Dynamics menu, and under Fluid Effects, let's go to Pond and just tear that menu off. And we want to create a pond. I'm just going to make it a size of 5 for now, but what we can do is just hit Control A to get to the attributes of this. I'm going to make it 7 wide, maybe 2 or 3 up, and we'll keep the height at 0.75. We've got keep voxels square ticked, so even if we were to maybe go 70 on one, it's going to keep the voxel square, which is really handy for us because if you do happen to scale this, you will not keep the voxel square and you'll get some weird results. So try not to scale, just change the size. That's quite important. And once that's done, let's create a wake. So I'm just going to go to the settings here, and let's just reset these settings. I'm going to increase the wake intensity to 10, but we can always change this later on if that's too much or too little. In my experience, that's about right. And I want to make this about the size of the character's finger, because we are simulating the character's finger pressing the table. So that sort of finger sized, and once we've got that, let's create a locator, and this is going to sort of drive the animation for this little wake here. And if we go to Window Outliner, what we can do is just put the wake inside the locator. And for now, I'm just going to hide the pond and we want to move this locator up a little bit because currently it's sitting on the ground. I'm going to move it to a Y value of 1, and what we just want to do is come along and animate the position of this to emulate the finger pressing the ground or the table. So I can see that this frame is where the button is pressed. So what I'm going to do is just on the frame previously key the Y value, and then on this actual frame set it to a value of 0, and you'll want auto key turned on for this so that it creates keys by itself, and then on the next frame it comes back up to 1. So it's a 1 frame button press. Even though the character's finger may stay there for 2 frames, I'm going to keep it just a quick 1 frame press, and that will generate a nice little wake in the pond. Now we might want to line this up a little bit better, so we can move the locator on X, Y, Z to line it up, and we also want to keyframe X and Z because we need to do multiple presses here. So let's see, we have another button press here, so key at the translate Y, it is pressed and then comes back up to 1, and then we'll need to key X and Z also. So let's key X and Z, and on this frame move them to where they need to be, and then it goes back up again. So that's good, and just repeat this process until we have all the button presses. The very last one is a dragging movement, so let's do this one. The character sort of presses down with here, so let's go translate Y key. Actually, let's key everything. So it's on the ground plane where the finger is, and then the character starts to scroll down. Let's just see what axis this is. I should know it's Z. About here, the character starts to scroll. It goes off screen. And let's just make sure that that's accurate. And that will be the pond off screen, but just in case, we'll also key translate Y so that the wake isn't constantly just sitting there. Okay, that's good. So just go through and animate the rest of the presses, and once we've done that, we'll take a look at the simulation we've created and tweak some of the settings in the next lesson. In this lesson, we'll continue our pond simulation by changing some of the settings. Okay, so I've animated all of the button presses with this locator here and the wake parented to it. And now what we want to do is take a look at how the simulation looks. So let's go back to the outliner and turn on the pond, and just move it to fill the screen. If it's not big enough, just make sure that you have all the screen covered. And once we've done that, we can see that the pond simulation is taking place, which is good, although we'll need to tweak some of these settings. So let's go to 5 for shaded view, and in the playback settings, I want to make sure we're on real time, because sometimes if your simulation is pretty low res, you'll actually be watching it faster than real time. So this way we can see sort of how it's going to look. Okay, so we can see that's okay, but it's a little crazy. These ripples sort of never die. They're sort of creating a muddy mess, really. When we have lots of button presses happen, they sort of join together and just create this whirlwind of ripples. So what we want to do is sort of make this liquid a lot thicker. so that the ripples die out quite a bit quicker and create a more defined button press. So we can go to the settings in the attribute editor for this, and let's go down to dynamic simulations where the settings are, and let's crank the viscosity up to 1, and let's lower the gravity as well. Normally you can, when you're simulating liquids, you can go simulate a viscosity higher than 1, but not here in the pond. But what we can do to compensate for that is to lower the gravity. And I'm also going to turn up the friction a bit so that these ripples just don't freely travel around forever. And let's actually crank the dampening up to 0.1 and see how we go now. That's looking a lot better. The only problem we have now is that it kind of looks like towards the end the character really slams the ground when the desk when he does the swipe. But if we actually have a look at the footage, we can see that it's quite gentle. So what we might want to do is go back to wireframe mode and go to the point in time where we have this. As you can see, the character very gently touches the desk, but we have quite a large wake here. So what we want to do is, for that last button press, we will want it to sort of not start out so high. So if we go to the channel box editor, you can see that it starts at a Y value of 1. Let's make it lower at a value of maybe 0.2 and just hope that that's actually high enough to not cause a wake on its own beforehand. And let's restart the playback and just see. Okay, that still was quite high. So now what we will do is maybe just keyframe the power of this wake on that first frame, or on the first few frames, so that it's not so intense. So under the locator we have the wake, and this an attribute editor has a power, have the density, and what we want to do is keep it. I think the simulations at the start look great, so we'll keep it at 10. But for this bit here, let's just key this attribute and maybe have it halved for this last one. So let's see how that looks. That looked a lot better. I think once we have the value of 5 to start out with, let's actually lower that to a value of 2, but bring it up a bit higher as the character swipes. So let's bring it back to a value of 10. And what I'll actually do is increase it to 13 beforehand. So let's see how we go now. It looked a little bit strong there, so let's just select the wake again. And so we have a value of 2 at the start. I'm going to bring this back to maybe 9, because I just think it was a little bit intense. And then let's go to a value of 1 here, and then a value of 10. Sorry, let's lower this also. Let's go 7. And let's see how this looks. That was still too strong, so let's go outliner, wake emitter, and You can see that it's increasing as it sits here. So let's keep it still at a value of 2, and then for those that final drag, let's bring it back to 10, because when it's sitting there, we had the keyframes increasing, and that's why it had such a powerful, strong wake. So let's see how we go now. These are all looking good. Okay, so that was okay. At the start we had an appropriate sized wake, but we'd like to increase the size a bit more afterwards. So let's go back and maybe just cut this keyframe and paste it a little bit earlier. That looked pretty good. Maybe a little bit strong. Let's go 2 and maybe 10, 12. That looks good. Now what we want to do is create a cache for this. So let's go up to Fluid and Cache and create a new cache. And I have one already, but I'm just going to replace it. Cool, and let's go modify, convert fluid to polygons. Now let's smooth out our mesh by hitting 3, and that will subdivide it twice. And what we want to do is come into the render settings. We want to use OpenEXR with zip compression. We want name.number.extension and 1 to 214. And we want this camera here. Let's go into the render passes, and what we want is the object normals. And this will allow us to basically distort our plate based on the normals of this geometry here. So let's create the object normal object space and associate that. And what we'll need to do is change the frame buffer to float for that render pass. And let's also just bump up the quality a bit. And that should be it. We don't need ray tracing. So let's go ahead and render this. So batch render. And once this is done, we will composite our footage, motion design, and object normals to create the final effect. In this lesson, we're going to start compositing everything together inside of NUKE. Okay, let's read in some items in NUKE. Let's start with the clips, and we want the undistorted footage. This is the 720 undistorted footage, so this is the format that it is, and let's hit S in this project to set our full-size format to that format. Okay, that's good. Now what we want to do is read in our motion design, and that would be under pre-renders. Please excuse how messy I am. Here we have it, and we notice that this frame range is actually started from 0, but our footage starts from 1. So if we hit M and merge A over B, we will have a problem. And if we just play it, you can see that it looks shaky. That's because it's starting at 0 and the other one starts at 1, so we better time offset these. And let's offset it 1 frame. And now everything looks dandy. Okay. What we want to do now is, this looks a little bit boring, just having white, and we could make it a bit more subtle, but a more interesting way of merging these two would be to multiply the footage by the motion design. So I'm going to delete this merge here and sort of make the tree a little bit different. We want to multiply A times B. I'll just get my viewer out of here. And let's set this to multiply. So now that's what we have. So once we've got that, we can then place that back on top of the footage. So copy this footage here, and this will be A plus B. So A plus B. Now if we look at that, that looks a little bit better. This here can be near the bottom of the tree, and this here is sort of the motion design. So what we might want to do now to make this a little bit more interesting is to add sort of a pixel effect. And what we'll need to do that is if we hit read and we go to our assets folder, I've placed in a 3K LCD texture, and let's have a look at this, and we can see all the individual pixels, and we're going to need the camera information. So let's just jump back into PFTrack where we match moved our scene and export the camera. Alrighty, in PFTrack what we want to do is just choose on the export node the NUKE Python script to export. And I'm just going to call this camera.my.py. Let's go export the scene, and export has succeeded. Alright, let's jump back into NUKE. Okay, now to import that camera we hit Alt-X so we can read scripts, including Python scripts, and under cameras we have the camera.my.py, and we'll read that in. So let's just see what we've got here. Let's hit L to organize these. It can't find the footage, so we'll just read in our own. We'll put this over here, and we have features here. Let's just make sure everything's good. Yes, it is. So what we want to do is put this LCD into a card and plug the card into the scene. We can delete these features. So let's type in card, plug the card into the scene. Here's our card. Now with this card we want to minus it 90 in the X rotation so that it's sitting horizontally, and we might want to scale this up a bit. Let's go 6.5 and move it over so that it fills the screen. Okay, that's good. Now to get this to composite correctly, what we need to do is split this into the red, green, and blue pixels, and then split our motion design into red, green, and blue pixels, or channels, and then multiply them together. So here we have our two streams. This is one side, this is the other, and we want to use shuffle nodes to shuffle the red, green, and blue channels separately. So that's red, green, and blue, and we'll just label these. So in the red channel we want the red, but the green and blue we don't want. In the green we want green but not red and blue, and in the blue we want blue but not red or green. And let's copy this, and we'll just disconnect this for now. We'll paste these here and plug these in. And now we need to multiply these together. So let's hit M, 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 and let's go A times B, A times B, A times B, and let's set these up in a row, and we just want to go multiply, multiply, and multiply, and let's just check each one. So we can see that we have red footage in red pixels, green footage in green pixels, and blue footage. It's very hard to see, but hopefully, well, we could actually increase the brightness. Yes, we are getting data there. We will need to gain this up. Let's actually plus these back together. So let's move these down here. So A plus B, A plus B, This is adding red, green and blue together. Red, green and blue make white. So this should be our initial tree. Now it's very hard to see what's going on here. Let's add in a grade node and gain it up. Now we're talking. So we're getting that cool pixel effect. And what we might want to do is add some chromatic aberrations. So let's move this down and maybe again separate red, green and blue. So this was our pixel effect. That's it being merged back together. Now we're going to split it apart again. This time we only need to do one side. So we copy these, paste them before the plus, red, green and blue. Let's plus these back together, A plus B, A plus B. And then, so this is back to normal, but now we have the channel split, red, green and blue. And this, we did have them split before, but now we have them split actually combined and graded. So now if we offset the red and blue channels, so blue can be -1, -1, red can be 1, 1, we have chromatic aberration. So if we were to disable these, that's how it was, and that's how it is now. Very cool. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. What we'll do in the next lesson is come in and composite the normals pass that we rendered out of Maya to add in the liquid refraction. In this lesson, we're going to composite our liquid refraction and do a few last-minute tweaks, and we'll be all finished. So let's begin by reading in our normals pass, and let's come down here and hit R and navigate to images. I saved mine here, and let's take a look at these normals. So let's go to the normals, and we have the red. Let's go to a part where we actually have a ripple. The red is the U, and the blue channel is the V. Green channel is, I'm not really sure. We don't actually need the green channel, but you'll notice that in the red and green channels we don't actually have any alpha at all. So what we need to do is pre-multiply that by the alpha of the RGB. So let's go pre-mult, and we want to multiply the normals channel by the alpha. So that's good. And now what we want to do is soften these normals a little bit by blurring them, maybe just 2 pixels. And then what we want to do is shuffle them into the stream. So let's add in a shuffle copy. So from 1 into the 2. And what we want to do is take the normals, and we want to put them into the normal. But red is red, and blue is actually green. So we want blue here. And for the blue channel, we can just have that black because there's no useful information. So if we now look at this shuffle copy and have a look at the normals, we should see that in the red channel and the green channel we have the information, the U and V normals, as opposed to in our read node in the normals where we had it in red and blue, and the green was useless. So what we want to do now is distort this footage based on our normals, and we can do that with iDistort node. Let's come back to RGB, and let's go to a bit where the button is pressed, and let's distort all channels based off of the normals. We can see there was a little bit of distortion there. We could scale up the distortion, or what we can also do is grade up. So let's grade these after the pre-mult. Let's gain it. And what we want to do is choose the normals. So we've gained at 5, let's scale at 5, and we can see we are indeed getting our ripple effect. Very cool. Now this ripple effect is actually taking place on the desk. Technically that wouldn't be correct, you'd only have the ripple effect on the pixels, but I actually think it creates a more interesting looking sort of futuristic effect if somehow whatever this keyboard was able to add its little refraction to the desk, even though the desk is a real surface and not projected. So this doesn't really make as much sense, or is less lifelike, but I think it looks cooler, so therefore it wins. We do have a little problem with the alpha of the normals, so before pre-melting we can erode the alpha. Let's go -2 pixels to get rid of that, and let's just put this all in one stream. Now I think the pixels are a little bit sharp in comparison to the rest of the image, so after we render these, I'm going to add in a soften. And that's a little bit strong, although that's probably more realistic. I want to get a little bit of the clarity back. Go 0.35, even though the camera probably wouldn't be able to pick up this much detail. I just like the look of it. And something else we definitely need to do is place the roto of the hand. So let's go down to the very bottom of our stream, and if we go to read and go into assets, I've rotoed the hand. Now this is from the original sequence, so we'll have a bit of retiming to do. So let's add in a time offset, and let's just go A over B for now, or A plus B, just so we can see what's going on here. Let's go plus, and because everything else was starting at frame 1 and this is starting at frame 183, it will probably be -182. Now this was also rotoed at the original format size, so let's add in a reformat. Okay, that looks good. So what we want to now do is grab the original footage and multiply these two together, and then pipe that back into the stream. So let's go A times B. Multiply. And then A over B instead of plus. Now that didn't really work, and the reason for that is because this doesn't have an alpha channel. So what we want to do is in here, go auto alpha, and still no alpha channel. So what we might want to do is just shuffle in the red channel. As we can see, we have red, green, and blue, but no alpha. So let's shuffle the red channel into the alpha channel. So now we have an alpha channel. So this should now make the over operation work. Very good. One other thing I'd like to do is brighten this up a little bit more. So let's go back to the grade. Let's try 55, 60, 70 even. That looks better. And what we can do now is add in some glows. I really like glows. I tried to refrain from making them over the top, so let's try and be very sensible. Let's add in a glow, and let's set the tolerance to 1 so that it's not going to affect the low dynamic range footage. It's only going to affect the LCD, and I'm going to make the width 1, make the brightness 0.1, and now I'm just going to duplicate it and make the width 2, duplicate it, make the width 4, duplicate it, make the width 8, duplicate it. As you can see, I'm doubling it every single time. And you'll probably know all these numbers because they're quite familiar. And I'll probably cap it at 512. So that's an interesting looking glow. That was before, that was after. It's quite subtle, but it has a lot of hue to it, a lot of saturation. Might not be the most CPU efficient way to glow, but I like the look that it gives. And one other thing I'd like to do before we finish this off is add in some color correction. And I'm going to add in a hue correct, so a hue shift. And what I would like to do is just shift the red axis. Let's go -10 rotation. So that was before and that's after. I don't really like this sort of, I don't know why, it just looks quite green, even though we definitely have a lot more red in it than green, but I just much prefer this color. It's a much more pleasant color, I think. And overall, let's see, maybe even -13. I think there's quite a lot of saturation in this shot, maybe a bit too much, so we can take the overall saturation down. But this is only affecting the red channel, so we'll add a separate one for this. So add another hue shift and take the overall saturation down to maybe 0.9. So it was fairly simple color correction, but I just much prefer the look that this is giving. Now what we need to do is reintroduce the lens distortion, and we can do this in NUKE using the PF Barrel plugin. Unfortunately, it's excessively CPU intensive. It takes about 10 times longer than it does inside of PFTrack. So what I might do is actually just write this out and then reintroduce the lens distortion in PFTrack. Otherwise, you can reintroduce the lens distortion using just this here, but if you want to exactly reintroduce the lens distortion that we initially took out, you'll need to use the PFTrack settings. So let's write this out. We have an 8-bit image, and we'll put this in the renders, so we'll call this our UI distorted dot TIFF, and this will be an 8-bit LZW, and let's render this. Alrighty, in PFTrack I've just imported the render that we just rendered out of NUKE, and what we want to do is grab the values from this undistort node. So first let's just right click and add in an add distortion node, and then basically we just take these values here, copy and paste, and we were measuring high order distortion as well, so undistort and grab the high order, and there we have it. The distortion has been perfectly reintroduced. That's the end of this series. I hope you've enjoyed following along and learned a thing or two. See you next time.